Meh. I came home on a Tuesday. No fanfare, no phone call ahead. That's how I always did it. Just showed up. 14 months in Ramstein, Germany, attached to a logistics coordination unit that I can't say much about, and all I wanted was to see my father's face when I walked through that door. I had a key. I always had a key. The front porch light was off, which was strange. My father never let that light go off before 9 at night. He said it was a courtesy to the neighborhood, something his own father had taught him. I knocked anyway. Nothing. I used the key. The living room was dark, except for the blue glow of the TV on mute. My father was sitting in his armchair, the one that's been in that same spot since I was in middle school, with his hands folded in his lap like he was praying. He wasn't praying. He was just sitting there, very still, in the kind of stillness that tells you something is wrong before your brain even catches up. Dad. He looked up slow. Like it took effort. I flipped the light on. The right side of his face was swollen. There was a thin cut near his cheekbone, dried and dark. His collar was crooked, like he'd straightened his shirt but didn't finish the job. I set my bag down on the floor and walked to him and crouched in front of his chair and didn't say anything for a moment. "Who did this?" I said. Not a question. Statement. He shook his head. "Don't. Dad. 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 Who did this?" He looked at the mute TV for a long time. Some cooking show. A woman flipping something in a pan. He watched it like it was the most important thing in the world. "I asked Mrs. Hargrove for my paycheck," he said finally. It was 3 weeks late. I asked her politely. I said, "Ma'am, I need to be paid. My son is coming home and I wanted to take him to dinner." He stopped, cleared his throat. She told me to wait outside her office. I waited. Then she came out with her assistant and there were other workers in the hallway. And she said, he stopped again. What did she say? She said that men like me should be grateful we have jobs at all, that I had no business asking her for anything. He touched his cheekbone gently, barely a graze with 2 fingers. Then she slapped me. Open hand, hard enough that I hit the wall behind me. I sat back on my heels. Her assistant laughed, my father said. 2 of the workers in the hallway looked away. Nobody said a word. I stood up. I walked to the kitchen and stood at the sink and looked out the window at the dark backyard for about 30 seconds. The neighbor's dog was moving around near the fence. The sky was that particular Midwestern dark, the kind without many stars. I came back and sat on the edge of the coffee table across from him. "How long have you been working there?" I said. 11 years. 11 years. It's steady work. The benefits. Dad. He stopped. The benefits are good, he finished quietly. My father is 61 years old. He spent 32 years as a line supervisor at a printing plant that closed in 2019. After that, he drove for a courier service for 2 years, which wrecked his knee. Then he found work at Hargrove Industrial Supply, a mid-sized distribution warehouse on the east side of our town in Ohio. He stocked shelves, managed inventory, trained newer employees who were half his age, and sometimes didn't bother learning his name. He was good at it. He was good at everything like that, the kind of work that requires patience and precision and a refusal to cut corners. He never told me when things were bad. That's how he was built. I asked him one more question before I left the house. "Is she the owner?" Hargrove. "She owned the whole operation." "She's the owner and the CEO," he said. "Has been since her husband died. 16 years ago now. She runs it alone." I nodded. "Go to sleep, Dad. I'll be back in the morning." "Where are you going?" "I need to make some calls." Let me back up, because this is the part people always want to know. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 32 years old. I grew up in a 3-bedroom house in Kettering, Ohio with my father, Raymond, and my mother, who passed from ovarian cancer when I was 19. My father raised me on the idea that you work for what you have, you respect what you earn, and you never make a man feel small because of what he doesn't have. He worked every day of my childhood. Never missed a day I can remember. My Little League games, he was there in his work clothes because he'd come straight from a shift. My high school graduation, he sat in the front row with his hands on his knees and cried quietly and thought I couldn't see him. When I enlisted at 22, he drove me to the MHEP station in Columbus himself. Said almost nothing the whole way. When I got out of the car, he grabbed my arm and said, "You come home." That was it. I came home. Now here's the part that requires some explanation, because I've seen the questions people ask about stories like mine, and I want to be straight with you. I'm not a billionaire. I want to be clear about that. But when I was 26, I filed a patent on a logistics coordination software system I'd been developing quietly on my own time for 2 years. A system for optimizing multi-hub distribution routing for military contracting operations. My immediate CEO knew about it. JAG reviewed it. It was entirely within regulation. A private defense logistics firm licensed that patent 18 months later for just under $4 million. I didn't tell my father. He would have argued with me about taking the money. He would have said it wasn't real yet, or that I should save it, or something like that. He's not a man who accepts things easily. So I put it in a managed account, kept living the same way, kept doing my job, kept coming home when I could, and I waited for the right moment to tell him. I never expected the right moment to look like this. That Tuesday night, I sat in my rental car outside my father's house for 45 minutes. Then I called my financial advisor, Marcus, who is one of those people who seems to exist outside of time zones. He picked up on the second ring. I said, "Marcus, I need to know what Hargrove Industrial Supply in Kettering is worth. Actual worth, not what she thinks it's worth." He was quiet for a moment. "Privately held? Yes. Give me an hour." He called back in 50 minutes. The operation ran about $8 million a year in gross revenue, aging infrastructure, 2 outstanding OSHA compliance notices, 1 for storage rack structural integrity, 1 for ventilation in the loading bay. Fair market acquisition value, he estimated, somewhere between 1.2 and 1.8 million, depending on liabilities. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked. "I'm thinking I want to buy it." Another pause. "Daniel, I know." "Do you want to talk through?" "No," I said. "I want to move fast. Can you have the paperwork ready to make a formal offer by tomorrow afternoon?" He said he could. I drove to a hotel, slept 4 hours, and was up at 5. Hargrove Industrial Supply opened at 7 in the morning. I was in the parking lot at 6:50 in dark slacks and my dress uniform blouse. Not full dress, but enough. I had my folder with me. Marcus had emailed everything through. I want to tell you, I felt angry walking in there. I want to tell you, it was some kind of controlled fury, movie scene stuff. The truth is, I felt very calm. The kind of calm I'd felt a few times downrange when everything simplified down to the next step, and only the next step. You don't feel big things in those moments. You just move. The receptionist, a young woman who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, told me Mrs. Hargrove didn't take unscheduled meetings. I said, "Please tell her that the son of Raymond Mercer is here, and that I'd like 5 minutes. She blinked, made a call, put the receiver down and looked at me strangely. "She'll see you." The office was at the back of the building, past the open warehouse floor. I walked through the facility on the way. I noticed the storage racks immediately. Some of the uprights were visibly bent. I noticed the lighting was poor in 2 sections. I noticed 3 workers who clocked me as I walked through and then looked away the way people do when they're used to keeping their heads down. My father had worked in this building for 11 years. Mrs. Hargrove's office was large for what the building was. She was a woman in her early 60s, well-dressed, hair pulled back, sitting behind a desk that was trying too hard. She looked at my uniform blouse and then at my face, and I could see her doing math. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "I understand you're Raymond's son." "I am." "I hope Raymond is doing well. He's a valued—" "I'm not here to talk about how he's doing," I said. I sat down across from her without being invited to. "I'm here to make you an offer on this facility." She stopped. "I want to acquire Hargrove Industrial Supply," I said. "Full acquisition, building, operations, inventory, contracts. I have an offer letter prepared by my financial advisor." I slid the folder across the desk. "The offer is $1.4 million. That's fair market value given your current liabilities, including the 2 open OSHA violations." She didn't touch the folder. She looked at it like it might move on its own. "I don't know what you think you're doing," she said. Her voice had changed. The cordial edge was completely gone. "I'm making you a business offer," I said. "This facility's not for sale. Everything's for sale at the right number." "Young man." She leaned back. "I don't know what Raymond told you, but he told me you slapped him in front of his coworkers because he asked for a paycheck that was 3 weeks overdue." I kept my voice even. "He's 61 years old. He has worked here for 11 years without a single disciplinary incident. He trains people you hired who make more than he does, and you put your hand on his face in front of his coworkers." She said nothing. "I'm not here for an apology," I said. "I don't want one. What I want is for you to read that offer letter." She looked at it again. Then, slowly, she opened the folder. I watched her read. Partway through, her jaw tightened. The OSHA violations are noted in the liability section, I said. My advisor has also flagged that the ventilation deficiency in Bay 4 has been active for 11 months. If an inspector walked through today, you'd be looking at fines and potentially a mandatory closure period. I paused. That would affect the sale price considerably. She set the folder down. I need time to consult with my attorney. That's completely reasonable, I said. I'll be back at 2 o'clock this afternoon. The offer stands until then. I stood up. One more thing. She looked up. My father's back pay. 3 weeks. Whatever the number is. I'd like a check cut before I leave the building today. I spent the morning hours doing 2 things. First, I called the labor attorney I'd been connected to through a veterans resource network. I explained the situation. She said the unpaid wages alone were a straightforward wage theft claim under Ohio law, and the assault could be pursued separately. She said she'd have a demand letter ready if I needed it. Second, I drove to my father's house. He was in the kitchen making coffee when I walked in, still moving slowly, favoring one side slightly. The swelling had gone down a little overnight, but the discoloration was spreading the way bruising does. He looked at me for a moment. You went there, didn't you? I made her an offer on the building. He set his mode down very carefully. Daniel, Dad, you can't just— I can, I said, and I want to, but I need to know something first. I need you to sit down and let me explain something to me. He sat. I told him about the patent, about the licensing agreement, about Marcus and the account. I watched his face the whole time. He was quiet for a long time after I finished. Why didn't you tell me? He said, not angry. Just quiet. Because I knew you'd argue with me about it. He made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Yeah. He looked at his hands on the table. Yeah, I would have. I'm not doing this to take care of you, I said. I know you don't want that. I'm doing this because she put her hand on your face, and she did it because she thought nothing would happen. She thought you had no one. I stopped. You have me. He didn't say anything for a while. Then what happens to the workers there? If you buy it, and I've been thinking about that. There are 34 people on that floor, Daniel. Some of them have been there longer than me. I know. I nodded. I'm not going to gut the operation. I want to fix it. The OSHA issues, the pay structure, there are people there being paid under market rate. I've already looked at the numbers. My father looked at me for a long moment. You've been up all night. I slept some. He picked up his coffee mug again, held it in both hands, looked out the kitchen window at his backyard for a while. The same backyard I grew up in. The garden bed on the left side, slightly overgrown now. The shed he built himself the summer I was 12. Okay, he said. Okay? Okay. He looked back at me. What time do you go back? 2 o'clock. He looked at the clock on the microwave. That gives us time for breakfast. I was back in Mrs. Hargrove's parking lot at 1:45. Her attorney had called Marcus at 11:30 that morning. There had been a back and forth. By 1 o'clock, Marcus called me to say they were prepared to accept the offer with one modification. She wanted 60 days to transition out of operational management rather than 30. I said 60 days was fine. I walked back in at 2 o'clock exactly. The signing took about 40 minutes. The atmosphere was quiet and functional the way those things are. Papers across a table, initials and signatures, the attorney explaining sections. Mrs. Hargrove signed without looking at me much. At one point our eyes met, and she looked away first. Before I left, her office manager handed me an envelope. Inside was a check made out to Raymond Mercer. 3 weeks of wages, every cent. I put it in my inside pocket. There's a moment I keep coming back to. It's not the signing. It's not walking back into that building as the owner, though that had its own specific weight to it, the kind you feel in your chest. The moment I keep coming back to is earlier, maybe an hour after the signing was complete. I drove back to my father's house. He was on the back porch when I pulled up, sitting in the old folding chair he keeps out there reading. I sat down next to him, handed him the envelope. He opened it, looked at the check, looked at me. What is this? He said. 3 weeks of back pay. He looked at me. What is this? He said. 3 weeks of back pay. He looked at it again for a moment. Then he laughed. A real laugh, the kind I hadn't heard in a while, the kind that's slightly surprised by itself. She actually cut the check. I asked her to. He set it on his knee and shook his head. Daniel. Dad. What did you do? I looked out at the garden bed, the one that needed weeding. I thought briefly that we'd have time this week to get to it. I bought a distribution company. He laughed again. Shorter this time. What are you going to do with a distribution company, he said. Fix the ventilation and bay for first thing, then the storage racks. I leaned back in the chair. I need a good operations manager, someone who knows the place. He went quiet. Someone the workers trust, I said. Someone who's been there long enough to know where every problem is. Someone with 32 years of supervisory experience before he even walked in that door. He was looking at his garden. I'm not offering out a charity, I said. I'm offering because you're the best person for the job, and because I need this place to actually run right. I paused. Also, you'd be working for yourself now, technically, since I'm your son. He didn't say anything for a long time. A long time. Then he folded the check and put it in his shirt pocket and said, "You're going to need to fix the lighting in Section C too. It's been bad for 2 years. I put in 3 maintenance requests. Put in a 4th, as operations manager." He was quiet again. Then he nodded once, the way he used to nod when I was a kid, and did something he was trying not to show he was proud of. I stayed in Kettering for 11 more days before I had to report back. In that time, I hired a facilities contractor to assess the structural issues in the warehouse. Both OSHA violations were corrected within the week. I brought in an HR consultant to review the pay structure. 11 employees, including my father, were found to be paid below competitive market rate. We corrected that in the first payroll cycle. I also discovered through the records review that Mrs. Hargrove had failed to remit payroll taxes accurately for 2 of the last 3 fiscal years. I referred that to an accountant and a tax attorney. That's a separate matter, still ongoing. I'll leave it at that. On my last full day in Kettering, I had lunch with my father at the diner near his house. The one he's been going to since before I was born. He ordered the same thing he always orders. We didn't talk about the business the whole hour we were there. We talked about other things. My mother came up the way she does sometimes, naturally, like she's still part of the conversation. On the way out, the owner of the diner, a man named Gerald, who has known my father for 20-something years, stopped us near the door and looked at my father and said he'd heard what happened and he was glad things had turned out right. My father shook his hand and said he appreciated it. We walked out into the Ohio afternoon, cool and bright early autumn. The kind of day that feels specifically like that part of the country and no other. My father stopped on the sidewalk and looked up at the sky for a second. Then he looked at me. "You come home soon," he said. The same thing, every time. "I will," I said. I drove to the airport. I sat in the terminal for 2 hours before my flight, and I thought about my father going back to that building on Monday morning. Not as the man everyone looked past. As the man running the floor, I thought about the workers who had looked away in the hallway when it happened. I didn't blame them. You look away when you have a mortgage and kids and no backup plan. I understood that. I hoped they'd feel the difference in a few months. I believed they would. I thought about the fact that he'd filed 3 maintenance requests about the lighting in Section C and been ignored 3 times. He'd be filing the 4th one himself now. That felt right to me. Some things take longer than they should. Some wrongs don't get corrected because the person being wronged has no leverage and no one in their corner and nothing to do but endure. My father endured for 11 years. He kept the light on at 9 on the porch every night and trained people who didn't learn his name and asked politely for paychecks that were 3 weeks late. He thought he had no one. He had me. He just didn't know I was coming. I've thought a lot about what my father did and didn't do over those 11 years. He didn't complain. He didn't quit when the pay was late or the maintenance requests went ignored, or the younger workers he trained got promoted past him without a word of acknowledgement. He just kept showing up every morning in the same building, doing the same work with the same care he brought to everything he ever touched. Some people would call that stubbornness. Some would call it pride. I think it was something simpler than either of those words. I think he genuinely believed that doing the right thing, quietly and consistently, was its own kind of answer to the world. He wasn't wrong. But he also wasn't the whole picture. What I've come to understand, sitting with this long enough, is that what happened to my father was never really about Mrs. Hargrove. She was just the most recent version of something older. The assumption that a person without leverage has no recourse. That a man who needs his paycheck can be made to feel small because his need is visible and your power isn't. It's a calculation people make constantly, usually correctly, because most of the time there's no one standing behind the quiet man to change the math. My father spent 32 years building a reputation as a man who did excellent work without making noise about it. In a just world, that reputation would have protected him. It didn't. It never does on its own. Character is not a shield. Competence is not a shield. What protects you in the end is someone who sees what's being done to you and has the means and the will to do something about it. I had the means. I'd built them slowly, on my own time, through work that most people around me didn't know I was doing. Not because I was trying to hide anything, but because I'd learned early that the value of preparation is that it exists before you need it. You don't build a foundation during the storm. You build it in the quiet years when nothing is happening yet. That's the thing about intelligence. Real intelligence. Not the test score kind. It's mostly just foresight. It's the discipline to solve the problem that hasn't arrived yet. My father taught me that without ever naming it. He maintained that porch light for years without knowing when I'd come home. He kept up with every maintenance request even when no one responded, because the record mattered even if nobody was reading it. He kept working with integrity inside a system that didn't deserve it, because the alternative was to become someone he didn't want to be. I watched him carry that, and I carried something too. I carried the patent application through 2 years of late nights and regulatory review and a JAG consultation. I didn't know exactly what I was preparing for. I just knew that preparation was never wasted. The morning after I bought that building, I woke up thinking about the 3 maintenance requests my father had submitted for the lighting in Section C. 3 formal requests, all ignored. There's something in that detail that stays with me. He did everything right. He followed the process. He documented. And still, nothing changed until the process had someone behind it who couldn't be dismissed. That's not a reason to stop following the process. It's a reason to build the capacity to back it up. What Mrs. Hargrove miscalculated wasn't my father. She calculated him correctly. He was a man who would absorb the humiliation and come back Monday because he needed the job. What she never accounted for was me. Not because I'm exceptional, but because I was paying attention and I was ready, and when the moment came, I didn't hesitate. My father said to me once when I was maybe 14 that a man's real character shows up in what he does when nobody's watching and nothing's on the line. I think that's true. But I'd add something to it now. Character also shows up in what you do the moment something is on the line and you finally have the ability to act. You don't get those moments often. When they come, you have to be ready. And you have to move.